Welcome, everyone. My name is Ekaterina. I'm co-founder of Future London Academy. And welcome to our conversation today, which will be about architecture, spirituality, soul, and so many incredible things. Today we have incredible guest, Christoph Egret. He is an architect and creative and spiritual person that started Studio Egret West more than 20 years ago in 2004 with David West. And this is an integrated practice where urban design, architecture, and landscape are seamlessly brought together, creating memorable places and spaces that surprise and delight. Among the projects that you might have seen or might have heard of is Mayfield Park in Manchester. There is Earls Court Master Plan, very, very important space for Londoners. However, being to Earls Court knows that this is a very, very special intersection. Clapham Library, as well as Studio Egret West, worked on the lots of underground master planning and stations and thinking behind what the London Underground, the iconic London Underground should feel like, including entrances to Liverpool Street Station and just actually thinking what is that Bible of London Underground that the designers and architects should follow. Christoph is widely recognized for his sketches and paintings and his creative process overall. And in 2024, he stepped down from the practice. So this is another thing that we will discuss today. What does it mean to leave your baby, leave something that you built for 20 years and step in a different direction? So now Christoph explores the Soul in the City, a podcast that explores the spiritual dimension of urban life. And I'm so excited to talk about so many things that not a usual topic of our conversations on this podcast, which is what does the soul of the city mean? Why should we care about soul of architecture, of creative projects? And what are these things that maybe we don't think in our daily life that actually create very special experiences for all of us? Welcome, Christoph. How are you doing?
Hello. Thank you so much for inviting me. And what a brilliant introduction. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm so glad we are having this conversation because I feel like every time we sit down and just chat about things, we go all sorts of interesting directions that have nothing and everything to do with architecture. So I'm so glad that we have a formal way to explore all of this today together with our incredible audience. And I would love to start by catching everyone up on your journey as an architect and as a founder, because not every architect, not every creative decides to start their own company, which you did more than 20 years ago. So could you tell us a bit of a backstory before you started Studio Egret West? What were you doing? How did it lead you to the decision to start this fantastic practice?
So I'll be very quick on the past because I think it's more interesting to talk about the present, but just briefly, I'm an Anglo-French person. That's why you can hear a French accent. And I was born in Paris, but I'm English mother. I came to study architecture at the AA in 1978. It was a really buzzy place. It was Peter Cook and Archigram and Nigel Coates and Zaha Hadid. It was really, you felt like you were at the one epicenter of activity in architecture. I had the luck to work with people like Nigel Coates, like Ron Arad, like Will Alsop, people who didn't know before they were putting their pen on paper what it would look like. They were always interested in that sense of discovery. So I was kind of really lucky to be in this environment. And then I stayed for 10 years with Will Alsop, did the Peckham Library, got a lot of confidence from building the Peckham Library, which happened to win the Sterling Prize. I had never designed a library before. It was my first building, so I was pretty pleased. And this is where Will Alsop was an interesting person because, he kind of changed scales really quickly. And he had this idea of big architecture, which was the same as architecture, but at urban scale. And he brought in this young guy, 28, called David West, and he and I just got on really, really well. And after about 4 or 5 years, we thought we can do it even better. And so we decided to create Studio Egret West, which was really the bringing together of architecture and urbanism, the specificity of architecture and the strategy of urbanism. And very quickly we found that actually urban landscape design, the space between the building, was actually the most important thing. So we had three legs to our stools: landscape with the glue, strategy with urbanism, and architecture with the craft and the making of forms, under one umbrella, and not a distorted umbrella. It was really like everybody would talk about all the different scales. For 20 years, we were known for placemaking, for taking on a site and asking questions about its roots, about its past, about its future, and how we could help social cohesion. And we did, you've mentioned a few, but Park Hill in Sheffield, kind of keeping an old building and giving it a second life before it was demolished, so it wasn't demolished. The Balfront Tower in London, or the same idea. And then bigger and bigger projects like the Earl's Court master plan that you've mentioned, where you really have to think about not just how many units you're going to create, but how will it feel to live there? And so we are already talking about soul in the city. How do you make a good place that is not just about the short term, how many units, how many car parks, what proportions of office and residential, but where are the trees? Where will the children play? Where will be the school? How will you make a shortcut between one tube station and another? So these were the preoccupations of our studio. And if I can make the kind of transition, I then was 65. The studio was 20 years old. We'd established an EOT, an Employer Ownership Trust, which meant that we were slowly making people who worked in the studio the owners of the practice. You don't do that overnight. And so over those 4 years, it takes a bit of time to establish it. But it felt the right time to step down. And that's what I did exactly a year ago. So you're catching me on the first anniversary of a year with having left Studio Egret West. And you've alluded to the fact that I've started in my mind, and I think I'll probably launch it properly in the middle of next year. A platform that I call Soul in the City, which is trying to give voice to a dimension of architecture and urbanism that is often silenced by planners, politicians, developers.
Oh, wow, that was a very fast transition from the beginning to the present point. But I love what you spoke about, that you always had this philosophical approach to architecture, not just the buildings and the units that we need to build, but what kind of experience people have, how do they feel this place. And I feel like this is something in general in creative work sometimes gets underappreciated. All these things that designers, creatives put together, how do they make people feel? And also, how can we even measure that? Do we know how people will feel in something that we imagine in our head? I would love to hear any of your reflections from working with that and experimenting with building master plans. What did you learn about what humans need, or what kind of your principles about creating these soulful environments and not just units and spaces?
I guess the beginning starts with the really simplest way to say it is, how do you make the world better? And I think it's part of your academy's kind of mission, how to make the world better. So everybody asks themselves that question, and often means physical in health, in bodily health and mental health. It means about joy, but it also means being in connection with the people that surround you. So the kind of social cohesion. How do you keep people talking to each other and really enjoying each other's presence? The well-being of the people who will use it. And then there are kind of nuances in terms of the narrative. So very much the practice that we created was based on good narratives, positive narratives, storytelling that would immediately, we didn't want to go into the jargon of architecture or urbanism. We wanted to tell stories that engaged planners, engaged politicians, engaged also the developers who sometimes only think about the bottom line, who only think about unit numbers. And so to tell them a story about an open square and then all the buildings look onto it, and that's where the children will play, and it's a shortcut to the station. And then suddenly they can repeat that story and they can engage other people to get excited about the project. And also very often what we did is we start a project with principles. So we say, that's the 10 principles. We present them to the client. And if at the end of a project we had at least 5 or 6 of those 10 principles that were a tick in the box, then for us it was a successful project. But so often the conversation then quickly drifts into unit number. Can we put a few more units? Can we make it a little cheaper? Can we value engineer it? And so suddenly you feel like the soulful element, the principal element of your creativity becomes a little bit more silent. So Soul in the City is really to say, let's give a voice to that aspect of a project that is about the long term, not about the short term.
And could you give an example of what these 10 principles could be like, or at least some of these principles that you had in the past?
I don't know. I'm thinking about a project we did in New Bermondsey, and we said, they were really tall buildings. They were like sometimes 20 stories tall. But we said the first 3 stories would be given to the public. They would be green, they would be schools, they would be gyms, they would be things that were for everybody. So they were not private elements. And I think that was kind of a really good principle. This is a principle that I wish had happened in, say, Canary Wharf, where everything that is public is below ground, and therefore it's more difficult to get life on the street. I don't know. There might be that all the buildings should be in different materials, so that it doesn't feel like a kind of everything the same, and therefore you can't find your own identity. Maybe that there would be a roof garden on every building, so that you could grow food or you could play or things like that. So it was like this, a series of qualities, and they often, these were often the qualities that would help the project gain planning permission, because that was a positive side of a developer.
I mean, you worked on some of the most exciting parts of London, rethinking and redeveloping them. And in general, I feel like for any architect or any creative to have something like leave a mark on London's architecture and landscape is a dream. And your work is now part of London ecosystem forever, which is, I think, speaking of legacy and speaking of the creativity that makes the world better, I think this is incredible to think about it, that you managed to change certain things to make them better for people, better for communities around them. What would you say, how did you find that describing those things? You mentioned that storytelling helps to kind of link the units in the business side to the soul and everything else. Were there any other ways that you found the way to kind of find this connection between business and soul? Because at the end of the day, you were running a commercial architectural practice. You needed to think about commercial value. Clients who come to you also were thinking about making money out of these buildings. But at the same time, if we only think about that, then we'll live in very soulless places, and I don't think it will lead us anywhere. At the same time, if we only articulate in spiritual way, I don't think any clients will come to us with the request, because they won't appreciate the kind of very fluffy approach. So how did you find this balance, and maybe what kind of things that you found, like on a very practical level, implementing, or the way you explain it, to make your clients believe in the both parts?
I can think of 2 things, but the one that kind of comes to mind immediately is sketching, drawing. It's for me, it's been a little bit sad to see over the last 40, 20 years, less and less people actually taking a pen and drawing, because they kind of jumped quickly to the synthesized image, the CGI, as it's called. The one problem with a CGI, I think that some CGIs are extraordinary, but the one problem is that it immediately closes a conversation, because it nearly feels finished. It feels like the finished object. And sketches has a kind of a quality of discovering. And I talked about this discovering with my previous practices, but and particularly will also taught me to have the confidence to sketch. And so for 20 years and a bit longer, I've really enjoyed sketching. And I would like listen to a developer, listen to a client, and draw while they were talking, and then I would then tell the patient, is that what you meant? And then they really get excited. Oh no, yes, but and then they and then you can tweak and then you can change it, and also I because I tend to use watercolor, there's a kind of softness of colors and so on. But so that's a really good example. There is a real immediacy between the pen and the paper that there isn't between us and the screen. And so some ideas come quite quickly. The other thing that comes to mind is the sacrificial scheme. I know it sounds negative, but actually it's a positive. So you do a scheme. If you talk with a client about a brief, well, you're talking in the void. You can't really, it's not easy to criticize the void. Whereas if you do a scheme and in your mind, it's sacrificial, i.e., if you disregard it, put it in the bin tomorrow, it doesn't matter. But at least you can talk about tree avenues, and you can talk about the sunset on the alignment with the sunset at certain moments of the year. You can talk about shadows. You can talk about light. You can talk about where the community can come together. The client, the planners, the politicians can all respond to those elements. So these are two examples of all to do with sketching a little bit. Yes.
So beautiful to hear how you describe this process. And few thoughts came to my mind while you were talking about it. One, that I feel like in the world now where CGI or any precision became so much easier with the tools that we have, as you said, we jump too fast to the final outcome to something that looks like a final outcome. And I think in precision, we lose creativity. The same conversation happens with data or anything else that, again, in creative world is now we constantly look at the data and the numbers and everything else. And then in this precision, we lose this wiggle room for imagination and creativity that is so important at the early stages. And I feel like sketching is such a beautiful way to open this window of creativity without getting too precise, but still kind of move forward. The conversation is not kind of sitting and doing nothing and just thinking in your head, but actually visualizing some of the thinking and ideas in a way that is still open, but also can guide the conversation in a certain way. There is a classic example from a product design world of IDEO that did very similar thing with prototyping, where they were talking to surgeons, creating a tool for surgeons. And while they were in the meeting, they taped the marker and the stapler and something else to say, like, is that kind of the device you're looking for? Is it this the weight or the size that you would be looking for before we start designing the actual physical product? Is this like roughly what you want to do with it? And the surgeon could hold it in their hand and kind of say, no, it's too big, it's too heavy, it's too small. And again, it opened the conversation without that precision, because everyone understood that the marker and the staple taped together is not the final product. But at the same time, it already starts the questions. So I love how you describe sketching as the way of opening the imagination in the clients and developers' heads as well, so they can contribute and they don't feel maybe too pressured by precision and the perfection of what architecture can look like.
It feels like when you've done a CGI, it's really difficult to change it.
Mm.
Feels final. Yeah.
Interesting. And speaking of soul, part of obviously your practice as well, you had to preserve or keep your own soul while running a business. So one is to have this balance with the clients and in your work, but one is a founder, co-founder, constantly running a business and still finding space for creativity, for imagination, for passion, and for curiosity. How did you find that balance, and were there any practices or any things that you did to sustain that curiosity for 20 years to make sure that you don't lose that approach yourself and keep your soul while still running a business that can generate revenue and have clients and pay salaries?
Well, I'm going to talk about two things. I'm going to talk first about what we did in the studio. We did something called thought leadership. So every 3 months, we take a topic. It could be the future of the high street. It could be the future of car park. It usually had a kind of future gazing kind of quality. There was ideas about food productions. There was all sorts of ideas, and it's sort of at least three times a year we prepare an exhibition, and we do something just for the joy of discovering the potential of a certain aspect of the built environment. And we make an exhibition. We create a manifesto or a piece of text. We'd invite people, we'd have conversation, we'd have 2 or 3 lectures that were aligned with that subject. And it did 2 things. It enriched the thinking power and the dreaming power of the people in the studio, but it also engaged the rest of the world. And it also then, quite a few times, you're the specialist of the future of car park, or you're the specialist of the future of the high street. And suddenly it was also good for business. So we kind of balanced the pleasure, and it was, it cost money to prepare it, but it was kind of good R&D kind of development. And then just on another side, we also make sure that, we do exercise. We have in our studio, we had yoga sessions and Tai Chi lessons, and there was a masseur that would come on a Wednesday and would actually give a 10-minute massage to everybody in the studio that wanted to. And so the overall well-being of the studio was preserved. I would have liked to have even a meditation room in the studio, and we never got to that. But if I was doing a new studio today, I would definitely have a place where you can be on your own, you can get your energy back, and you can have a moment of calm that then brings coherence and clarity, and therefore nourishes the design work.
This is beautiful to hear. And actually, I am the consumer of some of your exhibitions that you have in your wonderful space, because you have incredible windows in your office. And because I live in the area, I constantly pass by and see always the new displays and new things that you thought about. And I always wondered, what is the process? Why do you do this? And I love hearing there is something that you use in exploration for yourself and your team, but also it actually has a commercial value as well by attracting the right clients or people who might be interested in collaborating with you.
The best way to think about it is it's putting water on the plant. It's making sure that we don't dry up, that we keep on expanding our minds. Yeah.
Brilliant. Love this. I would love to talk a little bit about your leadership as well, because I think there are different types of leaders. Everyone chooses different style of leadership and who they want to be. And especially in the world of architecture, I feel like there are so many different characters in terms of how architects show up as leaders and how they're perceived by their teams and by the wider community. I would love to hear a little bit more about, throughout these 20 years, what did you learn about leadership, or maybe how did your leadership change, hopefully for the better throughout the years? What did you learn to become a better leader to your team?
We started, David and I, in the basement of my home here. Then we grew to, there was kind of different stages when you were 7, when you were 13, when you were 28, when you were 35. 35 was like a real nice sweet spot where you were big enough to do biggish projects, and you had, a secretary and a model maker and an accountant and somebody who knew how to repair the computer, and you didn't have to repair it yourself. And so the leadership changes all the time, but all the time, David, Lucas, and I had our table very much in the center of the studio and always available. Always available. It wasn't, if somebody came, I don't think in 20 years, neither David or I would have said, no, can you come later? Maybe once because we had to go out, but, it was always, what is the issue? And so nobody felt worried to come and see us and ask for direction or explain a problem or so. Listening is so important. keeping the enthusiasm in the studio, being positive, being straightforward, being honest. Even when you have a low, you talk about the low, but you talk about the next high, and nothing is horizontal and flat. And then we have. I mean, famously, everybody was kind of amused that we had a beer tap in the studio and a big kitchen where we could cook food. And there was a time where we actually cooked food when we were below 35. We would cook food every day and we would take it in turn. And it would take 2 hours, going 1 hour to go shopping and 1 hour to cook the food for 20, 30 people. But it wouldn't come that often. And you committed to that. And then you brought everybody, and sharing food is one of the most team building thing you can do. And sharing drinks, yeah.
I hear that a lot from, I think, the companies and creative practices that sustained for a long time, whether it's Wolf Hollins, whether it is Pentagram, or architectural practices, or Richard Rogers, that food was always a big part of the culture. Obviously, famously, the River Cafe came out of the practice, which is now a Michelin-starred restaurant, but used to be a canteen for just employees, but really cared about food and the quality of food. Similar at Wolf Hollins, during the times of Michael Wolff, there was a chef who would prepare food from really simple ingredients, but local and sustainable, and they were delicious, and it was something that would unite people. There is such an interesting connection between food and creativity, and I suppose soul is somewhere, that's where they overlap, because I think both have a lot of soul that I think we feel, but not necessarily we can describe in a pragmatic way. How do you make sure that this, so now when you grew, like you said, you stopped cooking, how do you make sure that these things, like this soul inside your company, still exists? Because as you grow, I think it becomes more difficult to sustain some of the practices that might bring people together. What did you find were these moments of bringing soul to everyday life of people?
I think it is more difficult as the practice becomes bigger, and that's why both David and I talk about the time when we were 35, where we didn't have to chase after so many jobs to have enough work for everybody. We'd all fit on a bus, so we could go and visit a piece of architecture somewhere far away. I mean, there's things like atmosphere. There's always been music in the space. Sometimes it's kind of an intuitive process, and that you don't really know, but I know people coming in the studio often said, "Oh, it's so nice. There's music. People are laughing. People are talking to each other. It's not a kind of silent space. So a bit of noise, just enough. Not. It is some real balance where choosing the right music at the right time of the day for the ambiance to be good. There is another thing, as well as our desk being in the center. There was a big yellow table, some kind of sunshine table in the center of the main space, and people could leave their computer and leave their desk and go on that to sketch, to talk with somebody else, to jam an idea. But it was in the center of the space. It wasn't in the meeting room, so it was public. The thing about a studio is that some people are really engaged and some people are more silent and shy, but they're all curious. And so, so we're always quite open about, so people can see the mood, can feel the mood of the studio. It's not in a glass box. You can't hear what we're saying. Hush, hush, hush. It's kind of, we carry it on our shoulders, the moods, the ups and downs of the studio. And so people enjoy that. Yeah.
Love it. We'll come back to more questions about your practice and you stepping down from the practice, but I would love to jump into the conversation about the main topic that we wanted to discuss, which is soul of the cities and these intangible things that make a space special, and some things that maybe we don't consider as creatives, as an architect. So first of all, before we go into that, why is it important to care about soul of the city? Why does it interest you to think about the soul in the city?
I think this, for me, the best way to explain it, if you imagine there is an inner side, which is the soul and the spirit, and if you imagine there is an outer side, which is the physical fabric of architecture and all the network that connects things together, contemporary architecture tends to be focused on the nitty-gritty of built form and networks. If you then if you're flowing in a sea of political tension, planning restrictions, developer profit, and all of that, you end up being forced into a world where the architecture starts to define the mood and the soul of a place. And so suddenly you have places that have no soul. They are completely dry. They don't give anything. They're just blocks of buildings that don't have any emotions. Soul in the city is really to say, can we reverse the narrative? Can we start with the inner side, the calm, the coherence, the community, the culture, all starting with C as it happens. And if that is enriched and it's from that dimension, and the sketches and the ideas and the narratives are informing the outer shape of architecture, then you're in a good loop. You're in a good direction. So suddenly, and that brings us to a kind of really fundamental question, which is reality something that we passively experience, or is reality something that we collectively create? And I happen to believe that it's the second. We create collectively, all of us create reality. And if we are coherent, if we are alive, if we are active, we then shape that reality and we create good architecture, good urbanism, good landscape. At the moment, it sometimes feels like the tail is wagging the dog rather than the proper way. And it's not so easy to be comfortable in that inner world, because it's becoming more and more difficult to be calm, to be, we are bombarded by 24/7 news cycles. We are bombarded by social media. We are watching digital screens 8 hours on average a day. That's a third of our lives receiving information from a digital screen. It's it can be a little bit of a challenge to, breathe and eat properly and meditate and look at the world with clarity. The platform of Soul in the City is to say, can we give a voice to all these wonderful things that could inform the outer side, from the inner to the outer side, and make a city where you can go on the top of Primrose Hill and watch the sunset or the full moon, or you can, close a street and create gardens where cars and children can play rather than go to their computers. And I could go on and on and on about things that you can't touch. So Soul in the City is really about all the architecture you can't touch. That if you can't touch it, it's on the collective, cultural, emotional side. And that is what we should be filling our cities with. That's the starting point. We know that people are suffering from isolation, from loneliness. We know that old people are not seeing young people. So all these things that we could do to create intergenerational connections between several generations. Playing in the city, we play in the countryside, we cycle and we sail and we do all sorts of things. We should be able to do the same. There was a kind of moment where parkour was this kind of big thing that you could jump around the city. Well, and in China, they do Tai Chi in the big square. All these things become really important thing. And I just feel at the moment, this is, if 80% of the population is going to live in cities, in human-made environments, it's really easy to feel well in the countryside. You walk down the country, you're in the woods, you hear the birds, you see the sunset, the rain falls on you. It's like you feel that you are of the planet rather than on the planet. And that distinction is really important. And I think for too long, we've been on the planet. I would like to talk about being of the planet. And
I 100% agree with you. I do believe that where we live influences so much of how we think. And especially as creatives, we know the difference of working in a space that inspires us, in a city that inspires us, in a place that gives us freedom of thought and creativity versus something where we feel constrained and feel in a box, and it makes a real difference in the outcomes. And the same with any decision making. I feel like if we are constantly stuck in boxes in very uninspiring environment, we will be feeling certain feelings, whatever the architecture and the place dictates us. Saying that, when you describe the nature and the countryside, I agree with you. I think this is beautiful and wonderful, but it comes with a challenge of no infrastructure, no convenience, no everything. And I feel like a lot of the time, the reason why cities lose its soul, and to be honest, any products and services in general lose the souls, in a way to find efficiency and convenience and speed that people value at the moment, and try to minimize discomfort. So even if we talk about communities in the houses, I feel like people try to avoid their neighbors because it's uncomfortable to talk to people. It's uncomfortable to meet a stranger. You need to have certain courage to come up to someone that you don't know and have a conversation and maybe feel embarrassed. And the more and more we develop things, the more we try to reduce the friction. And actually, the friction is what makes us human and what makes our lives worth living. So how do you find that balance between efficiency, where we don't see anyone, we are on our straightforward way? Because if we can have that just a straight line that goes to work, we don't need to wander around, that's so efficient, that's so good. On the other hand, our life will be meaningless. So how do we find the balance between efficiency and practicality versus detour and the soul?
Difficult question to answer, and I don't think I have the answer, but I'll try. I've got a feeling that, we've gone from an economy of production to an economy of attention. Everything is asking for our attention. I mean, we talked about social media, but I could, and the news cycle, but all the time we're distracted, and all the time we are being pushed towards individuality, whether it's the Apple Google or computer games or some kind of TV program. It's your attention, and we're not allowed to be bored. We wait for somebody in a cafe or something, and we open our phone, and it's something to look at. And Instagram's algorithms are kind of. I erased Instagram yesterday from my phone, and it felt like wonderful. So I'm on that journey of kind of reclaiming my attention should be mine. And also, we live in a consumer society, for good or for bad, and it is your television and your washing machine and your home, and everything is yours. But we could create homes that are collective homes. We could have watched a football match like they do in cities in Africa, and there's 35 people in a bar looking at football on one television. In America, in New York, they share their washing machine on the top or on the basement of a building, and that's where they meet each other. So all the things we can do to kind of break individuality, and everything that we can do to reclaim attention, I will, and maybe this is part of the conversation we can have after the podcast, but is a little closer to our well-being, to our connection with other people, and to that clarity that then helps us to design cities that are a little bit closer to how nature would design the rural environment. If we feel so good when nature designs a rural environment, then we should take guidance and concentrate on the river, concentrate on the quality of the air, concentrate on noise pollution, concentrate on celebrating the noise of children playing, because I can still hear. When I lived in Paris, we overlooked a courtyard with children, and I can remember that sound of joy that children had when they, and now, apart from half time, you don't see the children. They're hidden away. Where are they? And they're the future. So I'm not sure I answered the question, but I'm sure that might open up a few questions later on.
This is very interesting how you thought of the kind of the communal spaces and the way we can learn from nature. I definitely think we can just learn so much more from the environments that we feel good at. And I love the example that you gave about the washing machine. Again, it poses an interesting challenge. Like, on one hand, I agree those spaces with washing machines is a fantastic way to meet people, queues, any places where we can be stuck with other humans for no other reasons for long enough time, create these wonderful small conversations that potentially can lead to long-term friendships and relationships. But again, if we think from the convenience perspective, of course, everyone would prefer a washing machine in their flat instead of going downstairs in a basement and being stuck for 2 hours. So when you talk to developers or clients, how do you push for that inconvenience or soul or something that is not straightforward, because they want the most efficiency, they want the numbers, they want the business outcomes. And these things, like, it would be more difficult for a developer to sell an apartment that doesn't have washing machines in that, but you have to go to a basement. So how would you find a way to push people for those special moments?
One step at a time. I mean, I think developer traditionally, not all of them, tend to make a calculation based on the past. That's how people used to do things, and therefore they'll want to have a car in their car park, and they will want two cars in the basement. We can't do a development without that. But over time, automated cars will happen, and smaller cars will come along. Some are electric, some are not. People take on bicycling. We pedestrianize certain environments. So the planners have a really important role to play here. Not more than one car per flat, or even less ratios today, but more space for bicycles and so on. So whenever we are often the people who, as architect and urban designer, who translate the desires of the planners, who are also following the desires of the politicians, who eventually are really following the desires of the citizens. My answer is step by step, little by little, pushing the envelope as far as you can push it without breaking the tree. And also having a good narrative. It's better for the project. It'll be cheaper. It'll be, you can articulate it in certain ways. If you don't need a washing machine in your apartment, you have a tiny little bit more space, and maybe that space can be for a piano or for a yoga mat or something else that helps to make your space better. It's in the end, I think it comes down to we all need to speak and to be active about how we want to change our world for the better. So it's not. So that is the point. Is that there is currently, I would suggest, we are collectively pushed to being quite passive. We receive information and we've forgotten to be active, to fight for what we believe in, to fight to change the view of our politicians. We tend to vote every 4 or 5 years, and we kind of then forget about, how to influence local and national politics. And so it's quite important to, and even even in your street, somebody in my street, we said, oh, we could have a centralized energy system for creating cheaper electricity. And suddenly this person's taken initiative. I'm lucky. I live in a street that is quite well defined, that really came together strangely during COVID, when we kind of were so bored at home that we would talk to our neighbors. Sometimes you need a little, I know COVID was terrible for some people, but for some others, it was actually a moment where new discoveries were made and new connections were made.
This is so great how you mentioned about developers or clients sometimes thinking in decisions based on the past versus us creatives and architects and designers can give them the glimpse of the future. And I think actually that's probably now would be the biggest selling point for anyone creative trying to convince clients of any sort of vision or any direction that maybe not has been that directly maybe easy to convince, because I think now everyone is obsessed with future. Everyone is on one hand scared with the future, on another hand they're trying to understand how to prepare for the future. People look at trends, people look at future forecasting, foresight, all of these things, and try to analyze how AI will affect the future. So maybe now is one of the best times to sell our creativity, imagination, the soul through the lens of the future, because this is something that a lot of clients and developers actually struggle with, to understand what does the future look like. And we are the unique glue who can give them the glimpse and visualize it in sketches, or write about it in a story, or just describe it in a way that other people will see the future. So I love that you mentioned future as one way to sell the kind of the ideas and maybe creativity beyond what the brief is. What are any other things? Because you work with City of London, you work on Smithfield Market at the moment, which is one of the most exciting redevelopment in London and iconic in many ways. So you work with very serious people who care about very serious thing and numbers. Are there any other things that you felt like they react to or resonate with them when you mentioned? So one may be future, but are there any other things that you feel like they cared about? They're not just numbers and finance.
It's never just figures and numbers. I mean, sometimes it is, but on the whole, people are also people who go cycling, who go to the restaurant, who like to do it. But sometimes when they put their business hat, they thinking, and then they face with the bottom line. I think you're right that we are at a tipping point at the moment of it's very hard to find solutions of that work like in the past, and therefore, every 20 years, every 30, 40, maybe I don't know exactly the figure, but every so often you have to kind of reinvent. The old rules don't work anymore, and you have to review the rules, and you have to be a little bit. At the moment, I'm going to just add a little thing that kind of amuses me at the moment. I've been rereading Jung's archetypes. You have the Joker and the lover and the magician and the outlaw and the rebel, the ruler, and I think we need a little bit more of the rebel, and we need a little bit of the jester, and a bit more of the magician, and a bit of the lover, not so much of the ruler and the so maybe we do. I don't know whether rules are quite important too. But that's where I'm playing at the moment. I kind of, and it's not one window you look through. You have to look through that window, imagine, and then look through that window. The magician who can turn despair into hope, the jester who thinks about the present, the lover who kind of looks for beauty everywhere and kind of try and reinvent the future. And if that future is connected with that coherence that I was talking about earlier, then we have a better chance to create more interesting future. I think it's yeah, you're right. It's so important that we invent the future that we want, and that we don't just inherit our future. We have to shape it, and no better time than now. No better time than now.
I am obviously subscribed to that philosophy, considering Future London Academy believes that creatives are the one who define the future and can definitely change the world for better. And we're all responsible for things that we're doing now to make sure that the future is bright and is something that we all will want to live in. So I'm glad to hear that we're not the only one thinking about it. There is a need for it. There are other people on the planet who care about these things. There are so many questions about the practice and your studio. So I would like to kind of go back to that part of your life. And actually, before we jump into questions, I would like to ask you about you stepping down, because it's not an easy decision to leave your own practice. Why did you leave? And was it always the plan, and you always knew at some point you will leave your own company? Was it a spontaneous decision? And how did you assess if that's the right thing to do?
It took me by surprise. I thought I would be in the studio till I was 85, or however long I would be given to live. But the numbers just worked. I was 65. The practice was 20. The EOT was 4. And I don't know, sometimes, and more often than not now, you have to follow your intuition, and you have to say, and also, I mean, one really good reason for stepping down is that it gives a little bit more oxygen for the rest of the practice to feel like, maybe my voice can be interesting. And so you shake things up. And just in the same way we're talking about, you have to shake the past, and there are times when things have to become a little bit, the rules have to be broken. I'm sure that me stepping down has allowed the studio to kind of change its inner architecture, and the creative forces are kind of slightly different. It's also given me more time, and not kind of lazy time, but time to think about other things that I would never have had the time to think about. I've been reading extraordinary books, seeing extraordinary exhibitions, listening to extraordinary talks, and hopefully I will be kind of making a few voices on the soul in the city come to life, and also just have time to become. Running a practice takes a lot of energy and sometimes you can close your vision a little bit.
I appreciate how you decided to prepare for stepping down with employee ownership. And I don't think every country has the same kind of scheme that allows basically employees to become partial owners of the company. So therefore, you don't need to sell the company to someone else. So you can basically leave it running and be directed by the people who are part of it. Why did you decide to go that route compared to selling the practice, or maybe finding another director who will step in your shoes and you will still be an owner of the practice afterwards, and then creating, I don't know, a foundation that will look after all the kind of money that will continue to grow? So why employee ownership versus any other direction?
I guess because if you sell a company to a bigger company, 90 out of 100 times, the ethos, the quality, the nature of the original practice is lost and subsumed into the bigger practice. It's absorbed. And very quickly, all the talents that were in that original business kind of go and find different ways. So it might be a good financial solution, but it's not a good, if you really believe in the purpose of a practice, which is to create everyday wonder and to make the world better and to be a good placemaker. And that it will have to change. It won't be like that for forever and ever, but if you keep to that mission statement, and the people who are running it have been there for 10 years, 5 years, maybe some people 20 years, you have such a much better chance of success. And actually, the EOT framework was created because there was, particularly in the small and medium enterprise, so much better success by giving the ownership back to the people who are already working in the business and understand the day-to-day, who understands the root of the building, who understand the soul of the place, who understand that the beer tap is there for Thursday and Friday evenings and not for Monday mornings. So that's why we did it, and I hope it's successful.
And now reflecting on that decision of going for EOT, first of all, you're still happy that you made this decision? And what, if anyone currently thinking of going that route, what would you want to warn them about? Maybe something that you didn't know that would be part of the process that you wish someone told you?
What I didn't know is that it would take so long, is that people don't metamorphose from employee to initiator. It's learning how to speak to clients, learning to be present, learning to find new ideas that will be economically viable. It takes time, and some people rise to the occasion and others don't, and as you would expect. The other thing is that it shouldn't be a free for all. It's not everybody can be creative and everybody can push into what you. So still, I mean, one of the things that we initiated very early on at Studio Egret West was let the best idea win. It sounds like, God, you have to let the ego out and you have to, but on the whole, it's worked really well. People kind of know what is the best idea, even if the best idea is not theirs. And if you have that at the beginning of your creative statement, it's kind of useful. I think also, how long does it take to make that transition? Because there's also, we're talking about a financial transition too. The studio is paying the directors to to be able to then in the future earn better bonuses, better salaries, and so on. So that also takes time, and that needs to be explained. That is, it doesn't just happen the day you become an EOT. It takes time.
Perfect, brilliant. And for anyone who's interested in UK EOT, there are a lot of interesting resources. Unfortunately, it's very different for every country how the employee ownership works. I think US has something similar, but I actually don't know how it's structured around other countries. It's very, very specific to certain regulation and the way of doing it, but it's definitely something that I personally see many branding agencies doing that don't want to sell to bigger conglomerates. A lot of generally creative businesses explore it. But yeah, as you said, it comes with its challenges, but I think it's ethically and maybe philosophically one of the best ways to create succession. But I think there are technical things that people should be aware of going through this process. Okay, let's pick some questions from the lovely audience. Saeed is asking, how can you maintain the spirit of innovation and passion in my team most of the time, especially during challenging periods when ideas are sometimes rejected?
There isn't it is not a simple answer. It is when somebody rejects your idea, when a client rejects your idea. I mean, I would say that architect, more than most other professions, able to take a slab and, kind of metaphorically speaking, fall down and then stand up. I mean, the number of competitions we've lost, and we still do competitions, and occasionally we win 2 or 3 in a row and it's wonderful, and then we're on the roll and then we lose 3 in a row. It's a form of mental resilience that one has to have. I guess you also have to be careful not to be so attached to your ideas. And at the same time, I think we have to do more is architecture, urbanism are really expensive businesses. People are spending the biggest amount that they've ever going to spend. So you have to respect that. And so so architects have to listen. It's not just their little obsession that has to be catered for. And I wanted this brick like this and the windows like that. The conversation is bigger. So listening, compromising, if you get 70 or 80% of your authorship through a project, this is good. This is, you have to accept that. And the other way to kind of approach it is that, some architects are really good at identifying, with Zaha Hadid, you knew exactly, and you still know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get curves, and it's going to be expensive, and it's going to be memorable, and I can invest in that. These Studio Egret West knows how to reuse this old building and give it a second life, and it'll be there for another. I'm going to choose them. So the more you're clear about your identity, and the easier it is for clients and architects to be talking the same language. So then there is what I'm kind of saying is there's less chance of the ideas being rejected. Also, maybe sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes you have to say, okay, I'm leaving the project. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but it has happened on a couple of occasions.
Did you win? Did they come back to you and say, please don't leave, we'll take your ideas?
And I think when we said I'm thinking of something that was like, we were really happy to leave the project. On the whole, you have to just develop good conversation, make the compromise, make your peace with a certain regret, re-energize yourself, and keep going. It is sometimes difficult. I mean, the answer to the question is you just have to be resilient, and you have to find that energy somewhere.
I have 2 follow-up questions on what you said. One, you mentioned about losing the competitions and losing the projects and kind of being resilient. And I think there are 2 parts of that resilience. One is your own mental resilience of, okay, I can do it, I know. And I think there is a lot of your personal psychology and training that you need to do to get to this point. But another thing is the team. And how do you announce this news to the team? How do you make sure that they don't get demotivated? Did you have any rituals or the way you decided to work around that when you lose a competition? Did you give it debrief with the team? How would you announce the news? Did you find any better way of doing this throughout these years?
It's so much easier to celebrate a success than a disappointment. I mean, the way we would do it we still do it in the studio, is to take a bell and ding, 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 or a glass and, we've won this project, and, when we've lost a project, we might wait a couple of days before and we'd wait for the right moment to mention it. And usually there's a positive and there's a negative, and you kind of have to we weave through that. There is not an easy way. Sometimes you just have to say, we lost this project. It's really, and when you lose a project, well, we've all lost. It's the team's lost it. Everybody has worked until 3:00 in the morning and many, many hours and on the weekends. And like everybody in the studio, they've learned that resilience. I'm actually always surprised how resilient the whole team is.
Well, I think that, again, comes back to having a soul and having that culture where you feel supported, you don't feel alone. And I feel like then people, I suppose, unite around bad news and good news.
I mean, when we lose a competition or we lose a project, we often refer to, it was stolen from us, or it was, we were meant to win, or they didn't understand, or they were completely focused. We invent our stories to justify. Sometimes we have seen, that was a better project. They deserved it. So sometimes you have to also be honest about that. But quite often, not quite often, but quite often, there has been some projects that were not as good that won, and it was a blow. Yeah.
Well, I feel like we all can relate to that experience, no matter which industry we're in. So glad to hear. I love that you mentioned kind of storytelling of turning what it is, you kind of turn it into learning, whether you turn it into a story of what you stand for, and that you're still great and the project has been stolen. I think a lot of communication from the leadership perspective comes down to storytelling that you give to the team as well.
And also in that honesty I was talking about, to learn about the mistake and see, if we had done that extra drawing that talked about the atmosphere of a place, or if we worked on the facade in a better way. And so all the time you can improve, and yeah.
We have a few more technical questions. Yazid is asking about your innovation and R&D. How can the expenses of R&D be covered? I think you mentioned all these exhibitions and this thought kind of provoking ideas that you had. How do you budget them? How do you cover these expenses? Where does it sit within your company?
Well, it comes out of the profit margin. Some profits go to bonuses, some go to improving the studio, and others go into the R&D. You have a budget and you stick to it. And so I remember the early ones would cost, maybe £10,000 for an exhibition, for 2 or 3 people working on an exhibition, for the time of every different people to think with the creative ideas of the R&D. But I think we have made those calculations, and we probably, that money spent was multiplied many times by the new jobs and the noise it created about our practice, and how suddenly they felt that we were ahead of the game. And that's good.
So I think the important, I suppose, factor there is not just spending time and money on R&D, but also making sure it's shared and people know that you've done this R&D, and you kind of communicate your findings and learnings.
We'd create a specific website, we'd create a little brochure, we'd write a little manifesto. There would be an exhibition, there would be money spent on food and drinks for 200 people to come to the opening. There would be some talk. So we were talking earlier about the atmosphere of the studio, but everybody in the studio is invited to that event. So out of the 200, 50 or 60 of these are from the studio, and they're getting to talk with people in the industry, and they feel engaged. So that's also how you keep the spirit up.
And did you always have this idea of doing this? The reason why I'm asking, I feel like in any studio, in any creative team, there are always these ideas, let's do this, and it will be fun, it will bring us clients, and you'll help our culture and all of this. And I'm sure you've done many ideas that maybe not in that format or didn't work. So first of all, was it obvious for you? So this idea in this format will work. We need to do this R&D. We need to create a website, create a party and share. And this is what will potentially bring us clients. And at which point you decided, okay, we've been doing it for a while. It definitely works. We should keep doing it.
I think it's definitely been in the last 10 years of the 20 years or 21 years of the practice. Before that, I think it's also a question of scale. You have a budget when you're maybe that's one of the advantages of being more than 35 people is that you have the budgets to do the R&D. Before the R&D might have been focusing on the content of the website, or it would have been about publishing a book, or it would have been something else. But whatever it is, you have to learn to communicate to the rest of the world what it is that makes your heart beat, what makes what is the fire in the belly that makes you tick. Because if clients in particular want to feel the enthusiasm, want to feel that you believe in something. And that's why they were going to give you that job. The enthusiasm, pure enthusiasm. And that's often why we invite people into the studio so they can see the atmosphere and really feel that it's not just a director or an associate that is full of talk. It's the whole studio is kind of lit by the same flame.
Oh, thank you for sharing the journey of discovering this and also how many different aspects of the studio's life it touches.
It's nice for me, particularly now that I've stepped down, to talk about these things because they are precious and I'm quite sentimental about those things, yes.
Well, that's good. That means you still have a soul, no matter how many years you've been running the business. We have a few last questions before we wrap up. One question was from Vera about the size of the studio. You already mentioned that 35 or around 30 was your favorite size to get on a bus and go places. But in general, Vera is asking, I'm looking for some advice regarding studio size and team structure, specifically when the goal is to maintain close proximity with both clients and collaborators. If I were the sole person responsible for running a studio while also wanting to ensure a close connection with clients, what team size do you think would be ideal? More broadly, what do you consider to be comfortable studio size that allows for strong collaboration among team members, but also fosters close relationship with clients?
35 is a wonderful size. And the reason to go bigger is either because you've got more than one big project. It's like when I stepped down, we were 70, 80, 85 people. It's sort of double the 35 kind of zone. And what it means is that you can have a specialist on mapping and you have a specialist on computer generationing this, and you can have a specialist doing research on artificial intelligence. So the size means that you can have a bit more specializations, and also you have more. You can move a team of 7 from that project to that project, and then bring back. But with it has the problem that when the project stops, then you have to find work for these 7 people. So for 20 years, I remember David, Lucas, and I always kind of asking for advice on the perfect size. And there is no perfect size. And you just have to follow your intuition. I would say maybe that the remaining agile is probably the most important thing. Being able to start small and then grow in an ideal situation. And that's something that we never properly did, but we touched on it at some point, is collaboration. If you want to grow bigger for a short period of time, if you've made good contacts with the industry, other architects, other teams, another team of 7 people, do you want to team up with us on this competition? Do you want to team? And actually, clients ask for collaboration anyway, because they want the safe pair of hands who've done it before, but they want the young creative because it's important, and they want a female company because otherwise it's So suddenly the industry is forcing us to collaborate. So the key element of collaboration, I think, is really one worth, particularly in the contemporary environment of the industry today, is really a good way, an agile way of growing and contracting to adapt to the different projects.
I love that you mentioned collaboration. I think Barbican is the famous example of the architects who decided whoever wins the competition, they'll all build it together.
Yes.
And Barbican is a beautiful example of space with a soul and experience in so many different corners of it. So definitely collaboration is brilliant. Few last questions. Christoph, you've been running a company for 20 years. You stepped away now. If you had to start a company now again, what would you do differently?
I would be more precise about the authorship. So and not that our studio is not precise, because of the thing that I explained before, which is that people are spending so much money on your product that if your authorship and their requirement are aligned, there is a better sense of things working together. And I think for me that's the crux of the matter. Do you want to be an architectural practice or an urban design practice that is a service industry, which is the way that a lot of the industry is going towards? Or are you still the writer, the author, the drawer, the imaginator of the work that you do, and that it's not completely prescribed? And, I would say that the architectural profession has to also reinvent, what we were doing 20 years ago, we will not be doing in 5 years' time. The rules of the games are changing. Artificial intelligence is actually changing the material side, the construction, the pipeline of coordination with engineer and so on. That is, I would suggest, will be eventually automated. Not yet, but it will. So the architectural profession have to think about placemaking, have to think about the soul, because I don't think AI is yet able to kind of create social cohesion and playfulness and dreaming and praying and celebrations and rituals. That's not what it's being designed to do. So if I was designing a practice now, I would say that's definitely, it would be more inner soul rather than shape and form. And yeah.
You have a very clear vision and very clear brand around your practice that would be all about the soul and all about building spaces that bring this. So
Yeah.
Love it. Brilliant. Well, we have a question actually about your favorite places we saw. What would be your top 3 places, cities, places in London that actually have a soul, so we can go, all of us, and experience what does it feel to be in a soulful place?
I didn't prepare for that question. But I do think that of all the cities in the world that I know, maybe with the exception of Venice, but London is extraordinary. It is. It has gardens and trees and squares and low-rise and rivers and parks and hills and Parliament Hill and Primrose Hill and Alexandra Palace and I'm only talking about North London, but there's also it's an extraordinary city. So there's so much to enjoy. And the thing about London that is so interesting is that it was a series of villages that grew and grew and grew and kind of touched each other and made this big city. And I think that what is happening now is that the Westminster and the Southwark and the Islington and the Camden and the Hackney and are redefining their own identity, so that even if we're in the outer London, the wider London. I mean, I had some friends coming from Paris on the weekend, and once upon a time they would have gone to Soho and Covent Garden and Kensington, and every time they were going east, they were going to Stratford, they were going to Hackney, they were going to Haringey. So to answer the question, Stratford Park, I think, is one of the most beautiful spaces, extraordinary swimming pool. Studio Egret West's shawl that is shimmering above the station, made of titanium leaves that move in the wind and kind of tell you about climate and so on. I guess and in that area you've got Eastwick and Sweetwater, which is also a master plan that we did a long time ago, which once upon a time was pylons and wasteland, and now is one of a new kind of part of oxygen in the space. And you can never beat walking and promenading along the river, the South Bank. And one of my wishes is, could we have another bank on the north side, which would get the sun from the south and but instead of which we've kind of put a big road there and we can't, so in front of Somerset House, you can't walk along the river. And once upon a time, there was a project, I think it was at the Millennium, when there was this idea of a floating pontoon that would go the length of the Thames. So my third proposal is a proposal not built yet, to put the seed in somebody's mind sometime in the future.
I love all the suggestions, and I'm definitely with you on London being full of soul. And I personally love walking around London. And as you said, it has so many different areas that were villages at some point. So you do feel like you move literally from one village to another when you cross that path, whether you're going from Clerkenwell to Shoreditch. It does feel like you literally are in two different little towns. And I think that's what makes London so unique.
And diverse.
And diverse, exactly. I have one last question left for you, Christoph, which is a bit philosophical that we ask everyone who comes on our podcast. If you could change one thing in the world, what would it be?
You didn't tell me that you would ask me a question like that. If I could change one thing in the world. At the moment, it probably is something that I've already mentioned, but that we are of the world and not in the world, that we are not there to extract. If everybody could understand that they're all connected and part of the same river, they are all the different waves of the same ocean. I think there would be such a extraordinary, a lot of Buddhist and other religion talk about that, but if on a day-to-day basis we all kind of understand that, then I think we have better cities, better societies, better citizens talking to each other, and maybe a few less wars.
Yes, to more of this and understanding that we're all part of one big planet, Christoph. Thank you so much for your thoughtful, wise answers and bringing soul to all of us and reminding all of us that we all have souls and also that our cities have souls and we should create more soulful projects and just think more spiritually in the work that we do. It's such a great reminder, especially in the world of AI and technology that we live in now, that there is still space for that imagination and creativity. And I think it's now more than ever, we are craving it as a society, as a community, as a creative practice. We all want that connection with humans. We all want emotions and experiences that unite us. So thank you for sharing your stories and visions.
I've enjoyed it very much, and thank you so much for those nice questions.
Thank you, and thank everyone for joining and listening to our conversations and asking thoughtful questions as well. As you all know, we love sharing this wisdom as Futureland Academy, and we hope that it inspires you to do something great and change the world for the better, one step at a time, but hopefully that will give you some power and inspiration to do something small within your work. Thanks everyone for joining. If you found this insightful, please share your thoughts, your reflections, anything you learned anywhere in the world so more people can start thinking through soul, through spirituality, through bigger world and the planet we live in. Let's spread these great thoughts to the wider creative community. Thank you very much, everybody. I will let you know when I have a website that is running on Soul in the City. I hope nobody takes the name before I have to do that. And maybe that among the people listening today, there will be people who want to talk about, who want to be part of a podcast about something that talks about that non-material side of a city. I'm looking forward to listening to all these conversations. It's something that we definitely do need to get us inspired and engaged with these ideas. Thank you so much again, Christoph, for staying with us, for finding time for these conversations. And thanks, everyone. And until next time. Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.